And the idea of possibly losing both of my people didn't like sit with me. But, she also had people around. And I think knowing how to have that community of folks, she called them her A-team, and they were there to like maybe bring her to a treatment or sit with her or like run an errand. The network expanded. And I think at the time that we were dealing with my father, it was really close. It was just the three of us and maybe my uncle and my aunt who had now both relocated down to Texas. But opening up the fight is so valuable. So that was part of cancer that I recommend for people. Don't be afraid to find those resources around you.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. Hey everyone, quick disclaimer that this episode was recorded at the end of last year. As the world changes so quickly, wanted to make that known. If you feel inspired to take action about the injustices you're seeing, I recommend following activist Rachel Cargill online. She has courses that can help you spot your own biases and learn more, as well as showing up for racial justice. Always open to more recommendations. If you think there's accounts that I should shout out, please shoot me a DM or email to dyingoflaughterpodcast.com. And with that said, on to the intro and the rest of the episode. Very excited to share with you Brie Eley's episode today. Brie Eley is a very talented actress. The last time I saw her was about a year ago at a commercial callback, and I'm so glad we were able to connect virtually and honor her father today. Brie is currently in a commercial with Rebel Wilson. It's been playing all the time. Maybe you've seen it. It is for Facebook portal We Love to See a Booking. She's an actress and content creator from Sugar Land, Texas. She's a theater nerd at heart, trained at Marymount Manhattan College and the British American Drama Academy at Oxford University. She apprenticed at Actors Theatre of Louisville before performing regionally at the Kennedy Center and across stages in New York and the Northeast. She's been in a bunch of commercials, and most recently, she appeared in the multi-award-winning film Night Call and the Staycation episode of NBC's Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Today, we are honoring her father, who she lost to cancer, as well as her cousin, who also passed away after her cancer metastasized. So we're honoring John and Samantha today. Thank you, Brie, for holding this space. And we got into her grief story as well as talking about all the career craziness that went down in this pandemic. We spoke at the very end of last year, and I'm thrilled to share this episode.
Well, thanks so much for being here, Brie. I'm really looking forward to talking with you and sharing your story. And also, it's nice to connect with artists right now because I haven't seen many in person. So hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Chelsea.
Of course. For those of you that don't know, we're honoring your father today and would love to hear a little bit about where you grew up, who you grew up with, and would love to hear how you're doing and share your experience with others.
Well, my name is Brie Eley. I grew up in Sugar Land, Texas, which is just outside of Houston. Sugar Land at the time that we moved in was pretty rural. It had far as the eye could see, just like open space. And then slowly but surely, it started to suburban sprawl. And it went from just trees and rows here and there to full on subdivisions built out, entire complexes. And I remember coming back from college one semester. I was like, what are they doing over there? My mom's like, oh, they're building a mall. I'm like, a mall? Now? After I've been out and about? And when my sister and I were growing up, the big thing, because we didn't have a car, was to ride our bikes in the neighborhood, and you could go through different subdivisions that were being built and kind of walk around trespassing. And then you would ride to a cow field and then ride on home. So yeah. But then besides the rural build-about that was happening in Sugar Land, Houston was a metropolitan city with an incredible art scene. My parents put us into dance classes and theater and musical theater. I ended up joining this great school that was connected to the larger regional theater Under the Stars, and then was auditioned and accepted into a performing arts high school. So I was always around the arts. Went to school in New York, and kind of the rest is history in the making. As far as who I grew up with, it was my mom, my dad, and my sister, who's just a smidge older than me. Just close enough to be fun sometimes, and then also bitter rivals, enemies when other times. Yeah, that's the jam. It was a really close unit. And because we were the only ones of the family that were down in the like South area, the rest of my mom and dad's family, both in Detroit, it also meant that we were the ones who were always together. And when we go on vacations and stuff, it was about like just protecting the square, protecting the cube.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And when you say that your sister, I love that description of your sister. I'm curious, jumping around, how you guys grieved your father. Did you find that you grieved in a very separate way, or what was it like having her?
Well, she is still in Texas, but in the Dallas area. So only about maybe 3.5, 4 hours away. There would be a lot of like, as we were watching this thing kind of come together, text threads as we get updates. I would try to come back in just to like see what was going on. And I should say my father's passing was a very quick type of like from diagnosis until he actually passed away was about a year. Wow. So even with that and with trips home and stuff, it was also still like evolving. And knowing that my mom would be there by herself, it also meant that we did want to come home more often. So we didn't have to be as like away from what was like happening and like just witnessing that. And then once he did pass away, I felt like it really brought us together more to work through things and to support each other through it. And since that time, the square is now this really strong tripod. And that has been our like, you know, just the shape of the unit has changed, but it's still like very strong. We are also fortunate because my father worked at an airline that if things were ever going wrong, we could always fly home. We could always fly to each other. And in honor of his birthday, after he passed away, we started doing these annual trips. So there was always a way to like come around each other, spend some time, to be laughing, to be sad, to remembering things along the way, but at least we were doing it together. In the course of his cancer treatment, they also discovered that he wasn't receiving and activating the chemo as well because there was a problem with his heart, which was affecting the flow of the treatment through his body. And the doctor, in a very small room, one of those things we were like, I remember how small it felt, but the office was set up. So he told us at the time, we want to be able to do this other treatment for you, but we can't until the cancer has gone into remission. But the cancer isn't being as effectively treated because of this heart situation. It's like a total catch-22. And after that, like final, like kind of hit, I had flown into Houston, but I was going to fly out of Dallas. So we had the whole ride back home together. And then that night, I'm in one room, she's in the other room, and we're like talking through the wall, like through the doors and saying like, so this is probably when we should let go of that whole thing of like dad walking us down the aisle. This is probably that time when we're going to have to start thinking about what it'll be like the next time we go home, because it's something they can't do what they need to do because of where they are. And then because of where they are, they can't, you know, like it just all of a sudden like hit. And I think from after that moment, we had started to come on the other side of starting the goodbye. So because we had that time together, that whole drive and that, you know, night before I flew out, we were already on the same page in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Sucks.
Yeah.
That, you know.
Does suck. Yes.
Sucks. I don't know how to like describe it. It just was one of those things where it's like, oh, we're here. We are officially here. And my father did have like a bit of a resurgence, which I think is typical. Sometimes people will have like a couple of good months or something right before they pass away. Mm-hmm. And you feel good and you're like, look who's walking. And then it's like, and gone. It's like, and maybe it's more fortunate that he didn't have like a long drawn out process and that it was just a kind of go. But I definitely feel like when that year was happening, it felt like it was 7 years smashed into one. Right. Time has been really funny these days. And even now, as we're in this pandemic, like the idea of like what a week is or what a month feels like has changed. It's crazy.
Yeah. absolutely. I look at this year, I'm like, what did I do this year? But not that that is important, but you're like, I can't believe it's November.
Yeah. Or someone's like, remember when I saw you like 2 months ago? And I was like, that was 2 months ago? I thought that was like 2 years ago.
I completely agree. Well, so thank you for sharing that. And the 1 year, that's a short amount of time. And that must have been really difficult. And to go back a second, something I ask people at the beginning is about your goldfish moment. And what I mean by that is, do you remember the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way? For some people, it was their goldfish. Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
Oh, we were not the best fish owners. My sister, we wanted pets so badly, but my parents were like, no. And because we were so busy with our classes and dance and all that stuff, they were like, you're not even going to be home to take care of it. And we were like, but we could do this and we could put it in a wagon. My dad was like, I'll get you a wagon. You can put that bowl in the wagon and walk around the neighborhood. If you like, that's what you need for a goldfish. So we got used to trying to have aquariums and things, and then coming back to see a little friend floating. It was like just a thing. I feel like the first time I really felt the death of a person was when my grandmother passed away. My mom's mom had a heart attack. My mom was in maybe her 40s or something. And just the idea of watching someone try to maintain while they're seeing their world fall apart, it was very ooh, this is so. And also of the family members, because we were growing up so far away, when we would go home, we would usually stay at my mom's house or my mom's parents' house. So she was also one of those constants that was a part of our Detroit family time. And then to go back to it again and be like, oh, she's not here. Or going to that funeral service and watching my god aunt, my godmother's sister, watching her kind of fall out because she was so upset about her sister. And I was like, what is all this? And we're all dressed up. And, usually you're in your nice clothes because it's church time, but now we're in a church, but it's a sad thing. That was the kind of first, this is that version of watching someone go away and saying goodbye to them.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, thanks for opening up about that. It's so interesting as kids, what we take in and what we learn about grief and death. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, that was my mom's mom. That's such a big deal. Have you found that after losing your dad, did you find relating to other people in your friend circles to be challenging? Did you find it more empowering? Maybe a mix of different emotions, but can you talk about how it's been to relate to others after this loss?
In my immediate circle of people here in LA, one of my good friends, her mother had passed when she was a teenager. So this kind of specter of loss was a part of our relationship already. Mm-hmm. And then for her to be there with me as I was going through it, it was I'm in the club, let me welcome you in. And another good friend, her father had passed. So she was also a part of this club that you could talk to in a different way. If you don't have anybody in your circle that has already gone through this and understands that, it's such a different type of loss. And I think people who haven't, that try to relate to you because they went through some other thing that was, also traumatic, but just not the same kind of traumatic. Yeah. Don't get it. And the allowances and grace that you would give to somebody through that time are, I don't know, so at the same time, I also was going through a friend breakup, and they were dealing with something that was huge for them around the breakdown of a marriage. And I was dealing with the loss of my father and trying to apples to apples that dog don't hunt, And as accommodating as I could be, it's hard when you're going through something like that to also show up for other people. And vice versa. You think that maybe you're doing a good job of being a good friend, but it's just not adequate because you're also still fighting through your own situation. So while I was happy to have those other friends that did understand it, it made it harder when people were dealing with other things and it was you don't get it. And then I think along the way sometimes too is that people will catch themselves because they're like, oh, my dad is so-and-so. My mom is like, ugh. And you're like, still got it. Still got one though, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you talking to? Like, read the room. So in the scheme of things, I had people, but it does make it harder when you are around folks who forget that you're carrying this thing with you, this like silent bit of extra luggage. And it'll pop up when you're watching a sad commercial. It'll pop up when you're in a happy moment that you can't share. Mm-hmm. It's just this backpack that you already always have. And if people aren't willing to keep that in their thoughts, especially in those first like months after, years after, it becomes even harder to try and like extend that grace and be a good friend when you don't feel like you're getting that reciprocity of acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for mentioning also the friend breakup. I actually find like female dynamics really interesting, and like how friend breakups are a completely normal part of life that also doesn't get talked about. Not that this is the podcast about that, but yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Things happen, man. Life is complicated. Yeah.
Right. And your complications are always happening at the same time as someone else's. So it's just about acknowledging it, keeping space for someone to like be forgiven for missing appointments or for being late. Yeah.
On that note, was there something that someone did for you or with you around the time of your father's loss that you found particularly memorable, and therein perhaps advice for someone else to support someone else in that way?
Yes. And I don't know if this is actually able to be done by other people because it was so wildly generous, but also expensive. Because I was flying standby through this airline, you don't always get a seat. And it was around the time when he had a bad reaction, had been moved to ICU, and I was desperately trying to get home. And a friend bought my ticket, like crazy generous. And I don't remember if I paid her back. There's also that space of like, you sometimes like have a fog around a really bad experience. So you don't remember what all the details were, but I definitely remember that happening and being so like, I need to get home. Thank you. Now I'm going to go home and like say goodbye. But on the other side of it, there's a month, I don't remember what happened like afterwards, but that was definitely a moment where I was especially grateful to that friend. And unfortunately, that's the same one that we had a breakup. But, some things along the way just don't come through. And I will always appreciate that and think kindly of them because of that extension of love. But there's also, you have to protect other things in your life along the way. But that was definitely a moment. So if you can't buy a ticket for someone immediately, because funds are funny, you can maybe offer to walk their dog, go over and water their plants, pick up their mail, drop off a casserole on their front steps. That used to be a thing people did when someone passed away. Like, there's ways to show that kind of just silent. You don't have to say it. You don't have to ask me. I got you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's the act of doing something and not necessarily needing a response. I found that with my own dad's loss, a lot of people checking in meant well, but they really want you to get back to them just to make sure you're okay, but also kind of for their own satisfaction, which I don't blame them. But whenever someone I know has a parent that's lost now, I always say like, please feel no need to respond at any point, just so there's that pressure off. But hey, people are doing what they can do.
And I also feel like afterwards, I changed how I interacted with people when they were going through something, because it helped inform like, where would I want to be? I had a friend's mother pass away earlier this year from COVID. I sent that text message of like just condolences. And then I was like, I think purple is a beautiful color. So I just went to the store, got some beautiful flowers and dropped them off at her front door and was like, just a little bit of beauty for your day. And then I feel like I'm better about like just a month later check-in, 6 months later, because sometimes you get a flurry of activity around that moment. But then when you're still carrying your luggage, people forget. So it's like nice to say like, hey, I'm just checking in to see how you're doing. Because the year later, the Mother's Day later, the Father's Day later, it's just a nice way to let them know that you acknowledge that experience.
Yes, that's great advice. I'm a big fan of that later check-in too. Yeah, it's like you get like hundreds that week when you can't even respond. You can barely appreciate them. And then years later, it's like, oh, where'd everyone go? On that note, I'm curious how you've been feeling as of this year or as the years have gone on, since it has been several years since the loss. I believe 2014. Am I getting that correct?
Yes, 2014. It'll be, I don't know how many wins later that I couldn't share. So right now we are at the end of almost into 2020. And holidays are especially hard when you've lost someone. And even though you have started new traditions and you celebrate differently, the fact that there was a before and after to the how is so rough. And this year, I'm going to be having friends over that are in my pod, socially distanced, super safe, but it's still like my sister and my mom are going to be together because she can just ride up to Dallas. I can't just ride over to Dallas from LA.
Right.
And I wouldn't even want to, not knowing what the situation is. And our state is not in the best place COVID-wise. Neither is Texas. I've been living like a hermit, trying to make sure I keep myself in a good position to be available for jobs, because you have to test when you go into work. And like, I don't want to play any of those reindeer games. I'm trying to pay. I got bills to pay. So the idea of like going into another holiday season without my father it's never fun. A couple of days ago was also the Marine Corps birthday. My father was a captain in the Marines. Military life was very big for us. And then also it was Veterans Day. So there's also these other little like things that just like chip, chip, chip as you go. And so then what happens is sometimes the loss feels like it was eons ago. And then you have something come up and you're like, he's not here. So I don't know. Like, I think when it comes to like how you feel space away from the loss of someone that's important to you will change on the day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's like in different years, it's different too. Like some years you're more okay. Some years you're like, wait, I was fine last year. Why am I so miserable about this year? And that's okay.
Why am I sobbing on the floor today when yesterday I was having a kick-ass day? You never know. You never know. I love a good floor cry. So I recommend it. Clear some space in your house. Get on your back like you're a beached turtle and just like let it go.
I like that. I like that image. Thank you for bringing the permission. Okay.
Yes.
Let's like do it. And
Get it.
On that note, has there been any grieving practice or emotional healing practice you have found helpful? And this could be specific to your dad or also bigger picture coping skills. Anything you like to share that's maybe interesting, funny, random?
Wine.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, definitely the practice around the birthday trips has been great because it puts like a purpose to the time together, and it becomes a way to like wrap a new memory around something that could be sad. So I think that's nice. And at some point, whenever we do get together, whether it's for that trip or not, we'll have like a toast to my dad right afterwards, because he liked Heineken beer. If we went somewhere, we would always get Heinekens and drink. No offense to Heineken. And if you'd like to bring me into one of your commercials in the future, it's not that good. But out of love for that, we would get the Heineken, We would even sneak my dad beers into the hospital, because if you're on your way, you better get whatever you want along the way. Right around, I think it was that New Year's, and we love New Year's. We get orange, it's mimosas in the morning. And that's also something that I've kept going with. Any holiday, 10 a.m. if you want to, pop that champagne, pop that orange juice. It's your time, celebrate. Drink all day if you want to. But we brought champagne and orange juice into the hospital for my dad's last New Year's. And you have that like pop sound. And the nurse is like, what are y'all doing in here? Like she didn't say no. It's just like one of those things where there's some things that you want to keep going with. So the birthday trips are great. Keeping those toasts in the morning. And also what's helpful is when the moment of like a thought about him comes up, sharing it with somebody, not worrying about trying to like skip over it or that I need to make someone else feel better about the fact that I don't have this thing anymore. Whether it's, I don't know, like with my mom, let's say if we're on a phone call or something, and then I'm like, oh, la, 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 la. Oh, yes, so-and-so and so. We are dad's daughters. Or she'll say, you are your father's daughters. Because that doesn't change. We still get that label. We still get to be connected to each other. And you don't have to ignore it. And we haven't tried to ignore it. So, like, for example, around the time of the election, my mom was like, you guys be really careful because they're saying that there might be some things going on. And I was like, Mom, I have a taser. And my sister was like, Mom, I have one of those like pop out like baton sticks. We're ready. And then my sister was like, we are our father's daughters. Like Marines are like ready to go. Always faithful, semper fi. Like you are assessing your environment. You are being prepared. And so like those little things become like a moment of laughter and a little moment of sadness. It's not to try and like make them less or different than what they are.
I love that your mom says that you are your father's daughters, just acknowledging, because not every family does acknowledge grief after it happens. I personally think it's healthier to do so, but it's so complicated. My mom doesn't really, now she does because I like do a grief podcast, but a lot of people in older generations, they just don't talk about it as much. So good for her for even saying that.
Yeah. And I also feel like it's something that the world's going to have to start adjusting in terms of its relationship with grief, because we are globally being hit with a lot of loss and a lot of worry and anxiety around loss. And without some bigger coping skills together, it's only going to sit with you and weigh on you. After 9/11, because I was in school in New York at the time, that also changed the way that I recognize and talk about and honor loss. And so I feel like that was another little like tool in my toolbox. And then around the time of my dad, another like tool was given. And now within COVID-19, it's like we're also trying to like figure out what are the tools we're going to use to talk about loss, grieve, move through it, honor it.
Yes. And not necessarily just sensationalize it or have it be this like huge event that celebrities go through. I don't know. It's just so normal. And every single person on planet Earth is going to experience it. And
right.
I find that really interesting. Even the ones who aren't affected, knock on wood, this year by COVID, you want to have this experience of your parent dying. If not, that means that you died before them. And that's not good. That means you died young. So ideally, we're all going to have this experience. And I hope it can be a little bit less awkward for everyone because it's universal. Every human will experience this.
Right. What's nice about podcasts like this is that it does give somebody another tool, maybe. They get a chance to like not be going through it alone. I was also thinking about like, I watched the trial of the Chicago 7, and at one point in the movie, this is on Netflix, not a plug, but at one point in the movie, they showed how they used to have a moment every night where they would like display the names of who had passed away. And it was a thing where like everyone, wherever they were, had to stop down. And then they had like maybe 4 channels. So it really was everyone having to like recognize this moment. And we haven't had a moment like that. We haven't had a moment for our country to go through that. So I hope that people will start to feel like if it's not going to be situated and organized by the government, then you take one for yourself. Mm-hmm. Light a candle, burn some sage for yourself, because you are in this too.
Yes. Thank you for reflecting that and saying the nice thing about the pod. Yeah. I don't know. It's also grief is awkward. I'm like, if someone can listen by themselves, then that's hopefully helpful instead of not everyone wants to talk about it. And that's a good point about making sure people take some time to reflect on their grief, even if they can't do so publicly right now, or if it's not mandated right now, or yeah. So that's a good reminder. Thank you. And I really want to see that movie. How was it, by the way?
Why are we doing the same things now we were doing 20, 30 years ago. It's maddening. It like makes me tear out my hair. And I really like my hair. I'm trying to keep it. Why is it turning my hair? I'm over having gray hairs because other people aren't doing what they need to do. But yeah, the movie's great. So
You're like,
just, you know, yeah, we are in these really unfortunate kind of like cycles. We're around a cycle of like the 92 riots again coming up after like George Floyd passed on, murdered. We're looking at these same kind of things in our country that are not getting addressed. And hopefully through podcasts like this, we talk about addressing things so that we can move from them and start to make better choices.
God, it's absolutely unacceptable. And it's just baffling that it's, yeah, like you said, 30 years later or even before that, it's like, why are these conversations still happening? I mean, it's just unexcusable. It's not acceptable. That's a whole other podcast. It's not acceptable at all. And I saw that you did another podcast. Did your podcast episode come out on One Broke Actress?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I did an episode of One Broke Actress, hosted by Sam Valentine, and it was a conversation between myself and Saida Rashid, another Black actress in the world of comedy and commercial TV life, talking about how to be an ally as you move forward. And like Hollywood can start to shape a different kind of story for the Black experience on screen as creators, as producers, distributors. And yeah, that's another thing where it's like you're having the same complaints, arguments, needs not being met over and over and over again. And hopefully in the course of that conversation, we started to look at how people can empower themselves, even in that one-to-one experience with somebody of like, if you see something, say something. If you write something, write it authentically. If you watching something and it doesn't sing, let the people know that the note was off. Like, instead of just letting things kind of just keep going.
Yeah.
It's time to speak up.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Because I was Googling you before this and I came across that.
That's what that feeling was.
What?
I said, oh, that's what that feeling was.
Like, I felt it. I felt it through the Wi-Fi. Yeah. And I saw that episode on her website come up. So good for her. Good marketing that somehow up. So I look forward to listening to that. And I was glad that is a conversation that Sam had. And I'm curious, is there a way for white people or people of other backgrounds to be an ally to someone who is Black and grieving specifically? Like, could you talk about grief within the Black experience if something comes to mind?
Well, the grief experience, I think it's that kindness, it's that grace around not expecting somebody to show up the same way when they're also dealing with systemic racism and they've had a loss. I don't think of Breonna Taylor as being some other girl. I think of Breonna Taylor as being possibly me. I think of Ahmaud Arbery possibly being me. I live in West Hollywood, but I run in Beverly Hills. How do I know that someone isn't going to get feisty? I don't trust these hoes. You have to be on edge, unfortunately. So recognizing the extension of humanity when that kind of thing happens. And just because it doesn't become a big social uprising doesn't mean that one-to-one loss or injustice doesn't affect your Black community and the friends that you have that are a part of the Black community. So it won't just be a regular Tuesday. It'll be a Tuesday where they're also having to try and figure out, am I in danger today? Differently than I was yesterday. I was in danger yesterday too. But now is it heightened in a way? Your parents probably didn't tell you about like, hey, keep your eyes open because they're saying there might be some civil unrest after the election. Maybe they did, but mine sure did. They wanted to make sure I was ready in case something popped off. And then as far as the grief goes, yeah, just like recognize that it won't be a regular day. I've not watched the recording of George Floyd, but his text was used in an episode of SWAT recently where they just had a character saying it. And to hear those words, to hear someone calling out for their mother, to say, I can't breathe, to say, officer, please, I'm claustrophobic. please, calling for their mother, that's not just, let's go back to work and get on this Zoom. We want to just take a space from the beginning of this day and recognize that this has been a really hard time. Take a second to breathe, and we're going to cautiously wade into our next thing. It's not going to be business as usual today. Like, I think that's a way you can honor the experience for your Black community and friends when it comes to grieving. I think that's something that keeps coming up I hear myself saying, recognizing something, acknowledging something. Those are a big part of what my grief experience has been and my time during this year has been. And when people don't want to acknowledge it, it makes it feel like it's even less important to them that it happened in the first place.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's not your job to educate people about this or to speak of this. And yet I just appreciate even your perspective of what you're saying right now is like very helpful to hear, even though it must just be beyond frustrating that you have to keep saying it and, on different podcasts and all these things. It's just unacceptable. Yeah. So thank you.
I mean, I don't feel like I'm on some all I do all day kind of trip at this point. And I don't feel like I've had to do that much education of people because I'm in the community that I've built and the friendships that I have are already on the level. So that's kind of nice. I think it's just the willful ignorance. And it's unfortunately, because I don't necessarily have those folks in my circle, it's even harder to think about like, who's in their circle and why aren't they saying something to them? Talk to your man, talk to your cousins, talk to your friends. If that's really how you feel, if this life really does matter to you, when someone says something that's contradictory, stop down and say, hey, man. But I mean, I don't have to do that much education because my people are already in the zone. And that's not just my people that I know that are Black, but it's all of the people that I have around you. Because at some point, if you have been my friend and know me, you also know and acknowledge that I am a Black woman and that my experience will be different from yours. So if you don't choose to see those things, we're not going to be cool anyway.
That's a great, very well said. And is there a resource or a thought leader that you can point to? And that's okay if not, but I don't know if there's a top resource or book or person you follow on social media or news article, email, newsletter. Does something come to mind? And if not, that is okay too, but curious if so.
When it comes to the grieving process, I'm thinking of, who am I thinking of? Give me a second to think. Let's see.
Or another way to ask it is also, was there something that was helpful for you at the time of the loss, even if it was a book about feeling empowered or feeling distracted?
I don't know. It's kind of unfortunate, but fortunately that the Black experience in America has been so fraught with troubles I've seen that like you get used to maneuvering through shit, like if I can say shit, but there's a different processing and overcoming that has just been built into my DNA that I feel like you go through stuff, but also you know how to show up the next day. It's not always easy, but that swallow sometimes is just like what being Black in America has been. So I don't know, like it's just a part of being means that you also working through stuff at the same time. And I appreciated that especially in these last couple of months, there's been more people saying, no, we're not here to save you. No, we're not always okay. There's been like a thing that says we don't have to be 100% all the time. And that's just been like social Twittering, Instagramming, not particularly one person, but just the overall mood has been taking off that weight in a way. And at the time, I felt like I was so caught up in just like trying to get through. At the time, my parents had also been in the process of wanting to downsize. So there was a house to be sold and to be packed up. What does they call it? Decluttered. And then like, once we did like go through the process of the sale to then like put my mom's house back together where she was going to be in the in-between time because she rented an apartment for like 2 years before she bought something else, just so she had a little space to figure out where she wanted to be and how she wanted to like make her after look. And I went down to Texas for those like 3 months to be through that and to help her. And so we kind of just like relearned living together at that same time. So if that's something you can do, you don't always get to have a time where you can just like step out of your life and go be around people that you love. But if you can, that's recommended. I don't think I've read anything as far as like about grief, but I always think that like having some story to go into, having something to watch. At the time, I also produced a film, so I was able to like blip into that and let that be a beacon, my little lighthouse. 2 or 3 years later, my friend and I decided to do a film about our experiences of going through loss.
Oh,
but
cool.
we had both lost our fathers, but we decided to make this story about losing a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And we called it Acceptance. It ended up winning a short film award through BESLA, which is the Black Entertainment Sports Lawyers Association. And as a part
I love it.
I know, as a part of winning, we got a deal through Viacom to distribute the film on BET. And
wow,
this idea of like how you process accepting the first one, they kind of say, or one of the steps of loss, was really nice to then put it up on film and let people also go through their thing while they're watching us in this film. So after the deal with BET expired, because it was only for a year, now we're in the process of trying to get it up on Amazon Prime. And yeah, I don't know. My way of like dealing with things has always been about creating something.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long answer toward, feel free to cut out whatever it was like fumbling toward that answer, but that's what got me there.
No, I love it. I love hearing about people's experiences, and everything you're saying is definitely relatable. And congrats on the deal. That sounds like a cool experience for sure.
It was really cool. And then since then, it's screened at a few places, and I definitely am behind on so many things these days. But that was one of the other like projects, was like we need to cut a trailer for it so that it can go up on Amazon. They like to have a trailer with it. And you're
It'll
like, but it's a short film. How do you have a trailer for a short? 45 seconds. But there's a really beautiful moment in that one, just in case we don't get a chance to see it, where like the girl she wakes up after the funeral and her friend is over trying to bake something and she's not doing it right. So she's like, hey, wait. You have to put down the flour first. And she put down the flour and she's like, then you have to like roll it out and you got to wet it. And she starts kneading the dough. And as she's kneading the dough, her mother's hands come in, and then the daughter's hands go away and the little girl's hands come in. And we've now flipped back in time to when she was making the food with her mother when she was a little girl. And
love that.
I loved the idea of honoring the traditions that you have in your family, let's say around baking or cooking together, but also in the moment of that creation and doing, you are extending them. You're continuing how they affected you and what they've given you.
I love that. That's a really beautiful image. I'm glad you shared that, especially just for someone who hasn't seen it. They should check it out because that's
right. Link coming soon.
Yes. Is there because it's the Dying of Laughter podcast, is there a moment about your grief that is perhaps comedic, uplifting, or bizarrely funny in some way that comes to mind?
Oh, we did laugh a lot. We're a laughing family. I think the times when we would like catch and laugh, sometimes it'd be like so movie where like you're fighting. And then you're like, what are we fighting about? Blah, 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 blah. Like laughter. Let's see.
It's okay if not
No,
I
it's
just like to ask. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything specifically. I just think like through it all, like that was just a part of my family's MO, was that we would laugh together.
Mm-hmm.
And then to laugh about like, oh my gosh, we were on one of our dad trips. We decided to go to Italy because my father had always wanted to go to the place that looked like a boot on the map. So our flight from, at the time, my sister was looking at getting a job overseas. So we had gone to England and she was doing her little thing while we were kind of bumping around. We were going to go through Manchester, connect in Barcelona, and then fly into Venice. Good trip, right?
Yes.
We get delayed in Barcelona because flights and rain or something. We didn't end up getting into Venice until almost 1 a.m, not knowing that the ferries don't run. Taxis weren't doing anything at that point. So everyone is in the airport like, well, how do we get into the city and what do we do? We're feeling strong. We're 3 women on our mission. We got our little map. And so we get off of the thing, not knowing that we had been dropped off on the opposite side of the large bridge of where we're supposed to actually be. And now we are traipsing through Venice, now 2, 3 in the morning. I had taken some Italian lessons before I left. So I went over cautiously in my, scusi. So, and then I like pointed the map, and I'm talking like broken Italian. Shout out to my tutor, Roberta, if she's listening. But they were able to like give us enough to say like, go left here, go right there. Here it is. We arrive, and now it's like closer to 3:30 in the morning. Get into our room, and it's been like a journey. We've been like traveling all day, and we all look at each other and we're like, what the hell are we doing? And we were like, you are so crazy. Why are you taking this chance of being out and about? But to this day, we still like laugh about how silly it was to try and like do all of that at the time, and how mad my dad would have been to have seen us making such poor choices, but then also feeling like we got through it because he was with us.
Yes. I love that. Relatable. It's like same story, different city when you're just traveling and just every little thing does not work out that you need to work out.
National Lampoons. I was like, where is the camera? Rest of the trip was fabulous, but I
love it.
What a start.
What a time. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, traveling sounds lovely right now. I was in Italy for Christmas last year, actually. I'm like, now I'm just not, very much not, but that is
right.
That is okay. Oh, I was going to ask you, well, okay, there's 2 more things. I want to address cancer and then career. So no pressure,
Sure.
Totally different paths that we're about to go on. Okay, let's start cancer and then we'll end on career. I don't like how this is going. Okay. Is there something about cancer specifically that comes to mind when you think of your dad? You know, unfortunately, cancer is such a common way that people go these days. My mom has stage 4 breast cancer, so I very much respect the journey. And yet, for people listening, many cancer cases are resolvable, so that is good news. However, sometimes not so much. Yeah, could you talk about your experience with cancer specifically?
Cancer specifically is not a party anyone wants to go to.
Right.
But sometimes when you get there, I don't know. I was going to try and like make something happy and like funny about it, but it's just not.
You eat cake. No, you don't.
No, it's just not a party you want to go to. My mother actually, about 2 years ago, she's now been in remission. She was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through her own process. Not to tell her business, but she's about to get a reconstructive surgery. So that'll be the kind of last part of that. But it's not fun. I'm thankful that we did have the experience around my father's treatment so that we were all kind of like cancer connoisseurs. We like, oh, so it's going to be like this kind of treatment. And when will be the so-and-so? I'm like, oh, okay. Is that a fine wine? Oh, nice legs on that cancer treatment. But like, and because it is so different in how it affects people, no 2 stories are the same.
Right.
You could only just try to like be a little bit more educated and aware. And she actually decided to have a port put in so that it would be closer to where they needed to have her treatments land. And I think that was also helpful because it did become more effective and to keep the diet up and keep the health going through that process. Like we were like cancer, like superstars. Like we were like, oh, okay, we got this. We got this cancer. Not to say that it wasn't also scary. And the idea of possibly losing both of my people didn't like sit with me. But, oh, she also had people around. And I think the knowing how to have that community of folks, she called them her A-team, and they were there to like maybe bring her to a treatment or sit with her or like run an errand. The network expanded. And I think at the time that we were dealing with my father, it was really close. It was just the 3 of us and maybe my uncle and my aunt who had now both relocated down to Texas. But opening up the fight is so valuable. So that was part of cancer that I recommend for people. Don't be afraid to find those resources around you, to talk to people that are going through it, either that are also fighting it or fighting with and standing next to somebody who's fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Also kind of funny about it, once you've said, oh, I'm dealing with this thing, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm dealing with that thing too. Or I also had that. And all these people are also around and you're like, should we like have a thing on our chest so we can all like recognize each other on the street? Yeah.
Thanks for sharing about your mom. I didn't know that. Breast cancer is, I'm glad, the wonderful news about remission. And
oh yeah.
I'm just sorry. Breast cancer, it's like, I'm sorry to be negative. It bothers me how many people have it. It's just, what's going on here? How are we not prioritizing this even more to find the solution? I mean, it's like everyone has it. Like, let's figure this out. It's ridiculous. But
I just recently finished watching Lovecraft Country, and the whole premise of this show is that they'll have a speech or some kind of like spoken word something towards like the end of the episode. And one of them was from Gil Scott-Heron, and it was a poem called Whitey on the Moon. And it was given at the time about how there's still lack of healthcare and education, but we've been able to put people on the moon. And I'm like, how are we still fighting cancer, but we got guys going up in SpaceX flights? How? I
mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm very far removed from the medical world, and I just wonder, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think conspiracy theories are extremely dangerous. I abide by like science, rules, laws, government.
Go Biden.
Yes. Go Biden. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Other stories. But I'm just like, is there something going on?
However,
they're making so much money, the healthcare system, off, treatments, chemo, medicine in general, painkillers that people are supposed to be on forever. Like, to my mom, they're just like, oh yeah, I mean, take 5 Advil a day. We can give you pain meds. We can do all this stuff. And it's like,
just treat it. How about that?
Like, what's the treatment? Like, what are the options?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting point about why are we on the moon and not curing cancer. But I'm glad your mom is in remission. So I will say that.
Yay, mom.
Go.
Come on, new boobs. Do this.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Do you mind? We don't also have to answer, but I'm curious. Do you mind me asking if she had genetic testing done or if you had experience with genetic testing for cancer?
So my mom did get a genetic test. She does not have the gene that is like the BBRCA1456 that is connected to breast cancer. But my father's side of the family had no cancers before, and he was still chopped down like a tree. So test, no test, I don't know. Live.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think, I have so much to say about the genetic testing in general. However, unfortunately, there's lots of people who are going to have cancer regardless of their gene pool. So that's the bad news. The good news is, for those who do test and who do find out they have genes, their lives are going to possibly be saved. So that's very important that people still do those genetic testing, even though it's not going to help everyone. Those people can be. I'm glad she didn't have it. That's better chances that you don't. So that's good news.
Just got these dense breasts, as the doctor told me. I was like, what? Tell you how dense. Yeah. What happens too with cancer, unfortunately, guys, when you realize that you can do everything right and still come down with something, you still have to show up for things. You still need to make good, be healthy in your world. You can't, go on a bender every weekend, And I felt like for a while I was like, especially because my father was first diagnosed with the T-cell lymphoma cancer, which is a kind of hella rare skin cancer. And I went on a thing where I was like, sunblock every day, and was like slathered in SPF 76. And then I had a day where I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this vitamin D. It doesn't, I could be walking down the street and it wouldn't matter, So definitely like highs and lows, and you go like super cautious, then you go like super reckless. Find your space in between.
Right.
And, show up for your own health however you can, mentally, physically, spiritually. Because if something goes down, you want to be able to feel strong in all of those different ways when you do have to go into this fight.
Yes, absolutely. And I know this was very recent. If you're open to sharing about your cousin, who unfortunately is not, I'm going to say it again. If you don't mind sharing, I think that's relatable for people.
Sure.
Who lost a cousin. So
we're going through this thing. If you're listening in 2027, there was this awful pandemic that our country wasn't prepared for, and people lost a lot of lives. But along the way, people also just lost people, because the other crappy things about life and death were still going on. And my cousin Samantha was a part of that continued just crappiness of the time. She was diagnosed when she was like in stage 3, and then it metastasized. And when I got the notice about it, now it's, taking over her brain, it was like, oh, so we're on that timeline. And no amount of like positive energy was going to change the fact that this thing had grown and taken over too much of her body to be able to fight. And that was in May. And she passed away 2 days after her birthday in September. Mm. So you are, I don't know, like part of it, and was also like that space where like it was when I had that conversation with my sister in November, where it was like, oh, okay, so we're preparing for this now. And then when the actual time comes, it's just as shocking. And you're like, wait, so that presence isn't like, wait, but yesterday was, and now there was. So people are still dying, and it sucks. I don't even know. And for her to be younger than me is so just the idea of like what possibilities there were for her. Really. And with my dad, he was 65, which was still very young, but he had a really full and amazing life. And we'd had so many good times together. And here she was just starting. Mm-hmm. Really she had actually lost her son to cancer when he was younger. And
really?
And she, after some, missteps, had found her place. She was in school. She was even invited to do a tour to like share her story to other people at schools. She was very involved with her school, like different clubs and activities there. Was about to finish, had continued classes while she was in treatment. She even, before she was diagnosed, she did a trip to Costa Rica, like as a part of her nursing program, was like ready to make moves. And they had diagnosed her and they were like, it's going to be a couple of months. And that was almost 2 years before. So
really?
He was in it. So that's what I'm saying. Like by the time that we did get to that knowledge of like, it had expanded now, it was like the fight had been exhausted in a way. So then those next 3 months were just about enjoying the time, sharing what you could, because we'd already been given 2 additional years on top of whatever the diagnosis was. And shout out to the people who give you those timelines. They don't exist. They're not real. Like you could say 3 months and then it ends up that the person's here like 6 years later. You could also say 3 months and then the person is not here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
it's just like
my cousin,
but it's not accurate. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Samantha was really special. She had a great smile and just like lit up the room. And you could feel that when they did like a live stream for her services, which was a really nice send off from her church family down in San Diego. And it included a speaker from her school, a speaker from her, like one of the clubs that she was in. And it was all very like socially distanced, and things were wiped down and produced. It was very well, like A+ production value, but you could feel from that laughter and the joy that was shared in those stories how much she was appreciated. So cancer, 7 zillion in 4012, and us, zip. Well, my mom. So yeah. Yeah.
Go mom.
Go mom.
Was this?
And I think also what was kind of great about being able to share that service through live Zoom or, tech streaming it is that we were able to still get that moment of closure. And my heart goes out to the people that haven't been able to do that because of what's happening here now. And it's a really, really necessary part of healing to have that space to celebrate the person, to hold up all of the best things about them.
Thanks for sharing that. It's really sounds really difficult, and I'm sure it will be relatable and helpful to people who have lost, a cousin or a friend or sibling, whatever that is, who's younger. And man, it's just like, that's a lot of things. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And I think I mentioned before, my family we were like the Lone Rangers down in Texas. And then the rest of the main like extended cousins and family and stuff were all in Detroit. She moved with her mom and my other cousin to San Diego. So they were like also my closest ones. So being able to like take the train down or drive down and her come up, it was really, it was a gift that I didn't realize I needed and appreciated as much. So now I got to call her now I'm going to call my cousin after this and be like, hey, Aunt Anita, how you doing?
Was this breast cancer as well?
No, it was kidney and then the takeover.
Man, it's like, it's so fascinating. Like, how do young people get cancer? Where does it come from? And why does it go away for some people and then for others not?
I remember her saying that she's like, yeah, it was hurting. And I was like, well, did you go? Did you like go check on it? The relationship with healthcare and the cost of healthcare has probably kept a lot of people from seeking out answers.
That's heartbreaking. That is so true.
Get to it, and it's much further than it needs to be. And much further than it could have,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it ends up that because you are worried about that, you're not doing the first thing, which is just taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
What a failure of responsibility.
It's absurd how much it costs. I mean, there's just so many issues, and it's like, my mom's treatment is thousands of dollars a month, and she's fortunate that she can pay out of pocket for some of that. How is that acceptable? Most people, that's not possible. And, even she's like, well, why? I mean, this is like a waste of money that I could have given to you guys when I was gone. And you're like, okay. And then I mentor a 9-year-old through a big sister's equivalent whose mom has stage 4 breast cancer, and cannot afford her treatment because she can't work, as most people can't. And even her insurance only covers 70% of the costs, even though she's like in a low income bracket, single mom, all these things, no job. It's like, why is it not fully covered? This isn't her choice to pay for these treatments. It's not an elective surgery. It's just bizarre. It's very bizarre.
You're going to go broke trying to live? What?
It's it's just
baffles me.
It's unfathomable. It's very irritating. But I hope, I always try to keep everything positive, even when it's not. So good luck, everyone. No, I'm kidding. But
no, it's like everyone could just, like, after they finish listening to this, go out to the sidewalk and they just, like, yell into the sky, just like scream, because that's what it makes me feel like when I try to think about how we've been able to set up this thing that is supposed to be there to do no harm.
Yeah.
But what happens if after you've not done the harm, you're harmed because you can't eat, or because you can no longer afford your home because your mortgage has been, like, you've had to refinance your house to live?
No. I hope the takeaway for people, though, is, this is just one small thing that doesn't solve everything. And even going to the doctor does not solve many issues, but just even doing your yearly physical and getting blood work done and having the doctor feel your breasts for lumps. Again, a lot of people will still get cancer even doing those things. And yet they're so small things. And I still have a lot of friends who, like, oh, I don't know if I did my physical last year, or, oh, I don't know. I don't think I've had anyone feel my breasts, or I don't think I've had blood work. I did not even know until maybe a couple years ago that you are supposed to get your blood drawn every year to see the levels, hormones, vitamin D, white blood count. Like, they can do that every year. And some people do it multiple times a year. I literally did not know that. Why don't we all know that? Like, hey, you have to do that every year. Still don't know that. It's bizarre.
Why did I not get that? But I know what an isosceles triangle is.
I'm sorry. That's hilarious.
Good thing I'm going to use that over and over again.
Do you get blood work done every year? I literally didn't know until like 2 years ago.
I don't love getting my blood drawn, but I'm all about it when it comes to, and just a part of, like, my actor hustle. Even when I didn't have insurance, I made sure I went to that clinic. Mm-hmm. Roll on over to that Planned Parenthood. I was like, hey man, so yeah, I got $4 and I need some condoms too. Thanks.
Yeah.
The idea that you don't want to let someone, like, get healthy or get access to health is a weird thing to me. And I am so grateful that I've lived in places where that has not been an issue. And now that I've on a different place financially, I still give my money to Planned Parenthood. I still make I feel it is so vital to get people access. Access to education, access to healthcare, access to food. If we can just hit those three.
True.
Yeah. So that's on my mission list. Just the part of my, like, that's how I can show up for other people.
I love it. And that's beautiful. And I love that you're giving back to Planned Parenthood, having been there yourself. Love it. And also, I'm going to switch gears for a second here. You mentioned actor hustle. I just want to switch gears for a second and have an actor moment, because Brie, this is just me breaking character for a second. I'm like looking at myself in the Zoom. I'm like, I look awful. I am so not connected. I am not in the city of Los Angeles right now. I am like in a bubble of ploop. I don't know what ploop is. I didn't want to say poop. I'm in a bubble of ploop. Let's connect as artists. How's it going? You shot commercials. You're amazing. I appreciate you. What's going to happen to LA? Let's not spiral, but I just want that.
Actually, I've been really fortunate during this whole quarantine demic era of time. I also do voiceover. So I already had a setup in my house to kind of keep those auditions going. And I booked a voiceover commercial for a company that shall not be named, and was able
to. So it's Voldemort. Got it.
Yeah. One of them will be out in January of next year, and I cannot wait to share that because it's going to be so huge. NDA. And I continued to show up as far as like doing Zoom readings with local theaters. Ended up doing a play festival through Orlando Shakes Theater that was all about like new works called Playfest 2020. I booked a series of commercials for Facebook Portal that are running now with Rebel Wilson.
Oh my gosh, I need to watch that. Like,
yes, link will be
sounds
sent.
awesome.
Trust. I'm gonna text you right now. And then
Do it, girl.
I also did another commercial for that'll. We'll see when if it airs, but that was really fun. I did a day on set of the new Saved by the Bell reboot that's coming to Peacock. I think that's like dropping on like November 20th or like Friday, I think. Yep.
Oh my God, are you so excited for that to come out? That's going to be awesome.
I mean, it's Saved by the Bell. Like, I used to watch that show all the time.
Like, that's huge.
Super cute cast. Same director who also directed me in an episode of Champions on NBC a few years ago. So that was like keep it in the fam, you know, just like me and Claire Scanlon hanging out all the time. Shout out to Claire. And yeah, I also started a private Facebook group for Black actresses in last year that has now expanded to almost 800 members and launched a talent database website that is public. So if anyone needs to find a Black actress, it's called Here and Ready. It's the actual address is hereandready.co. And in addition to that database, we've been hosting seminars to give people like behind the scenes access to mentorship and tips and tricks along the way. I mean, like, it's going down. Sometimes it's a little crazy to be trying to audition and do at the same time. But it's also been really nice to feel like I'm finding some way to connect with other women and how necessary it is to have that separate space. I'm also still active in my other actor community groups and Facebook stuff, but especially because this one is just for us and I've been able to see it kind of grow and watch how valuable people have and witness how valuable people have found it. So I'm happy with that.
So
I think
cool.
that's really cool. I'm trying to think of like the acting stuff is so funny, especially because, you know, I've been on my little game. I did a commercial or two here or there. I'd done some shows, but to then see all these things happening while we were shut down and that I was like, whoa, wow, thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I know. Yeah, I'm still. Yeah. And then a show that I did with Jewish Women's Theater here in Los Angeles is being revived for 4 or 5 shows through a theater in Philadelphia. So we're going to reformat the show for a Zoom experience, and that'll start in December.
Shout out to Rhonda and Susan, also a Jewish Women's Theater alum. Bless them. I love that we are both a part of that. That's amazing. Yes. JWT. That's so cool. Well, I'm just happy to hear like wins and that people are able to thrive in these times. And if you're listening and you're not, please don't feel bad. There's a lot of people on all sides of the spectrum. And
I mean, when thriving alongside like days where I'm like, is the world worth fighting for? Like, trust. It isn't always.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh, but like, lol. To
no. That. Yeah. And also for the, 2 voiceovers that I happened to book, hundreds have been recorded and sent.
Yes.
And just go into the ether and have made me feel like I live in a box because it's just me by myself, tired of listening to my own voice. Because all I do is like record the audition, edit the audition, record the audition, edit that. Like, no, what is it like? Every overnight success is 10 years in the making. Like, trust. Yes. No, I respect your hustle so much. I know how hard you work from seeing you in the grind the last few years. It's like, you know who's in the grind and who's like not. And like you're there, you are there, my friend. So I'm
happy about that. And wait, okay, before I let you go, I just thought of this. Okay, so the last time I saw you in person, was it feels like 3 years ago, but the beginning of this year, in January or February, I forget, we were both called back for, I swear to God, the last huge commercial before things shut down. And that Geico commercial runs 5 million times a day. Have you seen it?
Which one?
We were both called back for, it was like
No,
the Clogger one.
I remember running into you at that space. I think it was like the Ocean Park casting office.
It was the Clogger couple.
Oh yeah, that couple. Yeah. Good for her.
Like LOL. I swear to God, that was like a huge thing. I so wanted that. I mean, okay, I don't normally say that, but I really did. And there was 2 that they cast, and one went to like my good friend Ozzy, who's amazing and just like booked a series regular and is killing it. And one of them, like, I don't know who the other woman is, but she's funny. And like, they're both running like all day, every day. Do you ever see them? Have you ever seen them?
Of course I see them.
Okay. That was almost us. What if it was us?
No, okay, here's the joy about being a commercial actor or I should say an actor who does commercials in Los Angeles. At some point, it'll be you and your best friend up for the same thing, and you will not get it, and it will run all day, every day.
Did that happen to you?
It's happened. Like, you're talking about it, girl.
Okay. You're right.
I'm saying, like, and what's hard about these two is that sometimes you are going into things and you're like, oh, they wanted that. Well, I wasn't even going to be close to that. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't have been in the mix. They went with an old lady. Why was I even auditioning for it? And then you get the ones where it's like, oh, she's me. People are texting you like, did you do that commercial? And I'm like, no, it's not me. It's some other girl who looks like me. Thanks so much.
Wait, Brie, can we just say that of the 2 people, those 2, one, I mean, we're all very different, but one actually does look like you and one does look like me. Like, just gonna,
I'm saying,
like, I just realized that.
I'm saying the whole LA is like a copy of a copy of a copy when it comes to actors as well. As much as you want to be like, I am 100% me. This is all, I'm unique. No, we are all fun commercial story. I booked a commercial for Volkswagen earlier this year. We flew out to Vegas to shoot it in February. Ended up staying at the same hotel that Tim Kaine was at because we saw him in the morning going into his car as we were leaving to go to set. Huge 3-part mega commercial with Paul Giamatti and Karen Culkin. Just starts to run. New car, ready to go. And then swoop, there it goes. Because now, in these unprecedented times, we're all in this together and not in that car. So all the commercials that were a part of that car, all the things that were happening went away. The whole campaign just like stopped.
Wow.
So note to actors out there, if you're listening, don't ever cash the residual check. Cash the session check because you don't know when and if something is going to keep going.
I mean,
just,
God,
but then randomly, it started running again. And I was like, are we really about to reintroduce this car in August? Hell yeah. So you never know. Don't spend money that doesn't exist yet. Just go with the check.
Yeah, that's good advice.
All the people that were in commercials that started running, let's say around April, they have been the only ones that have been up because they couldn't book anymore.
They're so lucky. I'm sorry. It's too much. It's a little too much for me. I'm a really supportive, cute person, but like those Geicos are running more than anything I've ever seen. And like, we were both close to, that's just crazy, but good for us. That's kind of cool though. We were like up for that. That was a huge spot and a huge director.
Yeah. Great.
You're okay. You're like more mature than me. You're like, yeah, I've moved on. I've booked like 16 things. I'm like, wait, the past. Let's
No. I had a friend text me the other day being like, are you good about letting go of commercial, not commercial auditions, but like letting go of theatrical auditions? for some actors, you end up sometimes in like what feels like a co-star, what's that thing purgatory. Yeah. So you are just always doing the one line thing. And then you will maybe get a chance to do something a little meatier, have a character that's a guest star audition, which is another level where you are now maybe in multiple scenes of a show instead of just popping in for one or two lines here or there. And then because it is so rare, it becomes that much more important, and you're hungrier for it and you really want it. And it's harder to let those things go because all of a sudden it's been built up and it means that much more.
Yeah.
And when my friend asked me about this, because we had both just recently read for a show, she was like, "Are you good about it?" And I was like, "No, I'm not good about it. I want them. I want to be able to step into stuff that feels like it's showing off more of the work and joy and talent and skills that have been built all these years. But maybe it's just not there all the time." So yes, Chelsea, I have definitely been in a like, I'm not ready to move on. Why didn't I get that job thing? It's the biz. It's the biz.
It's the biz. It's the biz. Well, I'm glad sometimes you really got to like shut up and be mature. And sometimes you really got to just vent. You got to just be like,
yes,
I'm going to vent about that.
Yeah. And also in the course of these last couple of months, your actor community is now not able to have that in-person experience. I'm a very social. I need people. Yes. I want to like say hi's and like laugh and like give a hug. And now I don't get to do that. And I'm having to like reformat my home every other day to be like a studio.
Yeah.
I don't have studio money, but I'm trying to get lights. I'm trying to get tripods and set up this and microphones. And it's this whole other level of production that was not a part of my liberal arts degree. And the people that are booking these jobs now, I salute you. Because it's a whole another like level. And you're also doing this on top of the fact that you're seeing the news and we're going through elections, and like it's a lot to try to like put all that on top of it and then hopefully show up and be a funny nurse on the Goldbergs. Like
and hopefully show up. That's hilarious. And yes, I feel like my room is like so much random equipment. And I'm in my high school bedroom, like recording these things, being like, literally, my American Girl dolls are like, shut up. We've seen this. Like, how are we still here 20 years later? Like, get out of this room and stop performing here. It's hilarious.
Yeah, this you're having to like be like a one-man band. And then you're trying to figure out like who's gonna read the audition lines with me on Zoom. Do I have time to get a coach on this, or am I have to just wing it? Yeah. It's what it is. But best believe when everything was going down, what did people do? Turned on their TVs.
Yes.
They turned on the movies.
Yes.
We became the entertainment industry is essential. It's a part of what people need.
And thank gosh that it's like coming more back. It's not like normal, but it's coming. And I think, next year I'm hoping, like, I'm moving back in January, and I don't think it's going to be like life-changingly different in January, but it does seem like we're going in the right direction, minus the fact that there might be another lockdown. I'm a little concerned about that. But in general, it seems to be getting more active. So
part of me feels like there's been such a flurry because people are trying to like just in caseness around there being another lockdown in California. And that also means that now you don't have time to be precious. You got to just throw it up and keep moving. And yes, it may be harder to like say goodbye to something because you really did want that character and you want to be able to like milk it and find all the moments, but you can't because you got to do something else. And then you also have to like get that. People are trying to figure out what they can do because realizing how necessary it is to have that entertainment means that we need to make it, and it takes time to make it. And you also want to do it safely, and you got to get people tested along the way, and they're figuring it out, but we'll see.
Yes, we will see. Shout out to everyone who's figuring it out. People are working hard somewhere, somehow, and it's...
Thank you, casting directors watching hundreds of tapes. Thank you to the
bless.
COVID compliance officers on set with all the PPE.
Bless. What a world. Well, I could talk to you for a long time, and I have talked to you for a long time. So I just wanted to say I appreciate you sharing your story. And it's like life is crazy. And especially opening up about your cousin. It was so recent. And like, I think that'll be so helpful to people who are experiencing recent loss, and sharing about your dad and your career, everything, Brie. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm glad that we got a chance to like kind of hash it out. And it's also good because we are getting close to the holidays and they become so funky. They get really funky when you're dealing with losing people. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Where can people find you on social media?
On the socials, I am at Brie Eley on Instagram and at as in the cheese on Twitter.
Love that. We will send the linky dinky doos. Bloopers, 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 bloopers. Shout out to the only person who has booked commercials in this year. And that's not true. There's other people, but I'm going to just salute you and appreciate you.
I'm so glad we got a chance to do it. We had talked about this at that callback 7 years ago.
You're right. Wow. I used to do these in person. Who even was I then? Who is she? I
look at my headshots now and I'm like, who is that girl? I don't even know who that, like, that stranger.